Hi, it's Dwyer. It is May the 2nd, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, I'm not going to say who's going to win, nor am I going to talk about actual betting odds, because I've made some premium videos on some of these fights already. But let's talk about the series of fights coming up. We'll talk about 4 of them. And what I'm going to do is just raise the questions I've been thinking about as I think about these fights. Right? The first fight, one of the cash cows of boxing, Saul Alvarez, Canelo. He's fighting much more unknown, William Scull. Now here's the biggest question I have for this fight. Right, and I've looked at some film like everyone. Right? What happens if you are fighting a guy who has length, but who doesn't want to be in the pocket with you? Right, folks, there's a height gap here between Canelo and William Scull. Isn't a concern for Canelo always when he fights. The fact that he's a shorter guy, and if someone can touch him who he can't touch back, then he's going to have to aggressively be on his front foot to track down that individual. Right? Let me ask the question. And please feel free to tell me your answer in the comment section of this video. How is Canelo going to take that last step to reach William Scull? Right? We're talking about a guy, by the way, in Scull who has an extensive amateur pedigree. Now let's talk about some films that interested me in looking at this fight. Callum Smith has an arm injury. It's a serious one. He's fighting Canelo, and he is forced to go on his back foot. With one arm, he survives. He goes the distance against Saul Alvarez. Right? Let me make some other points here too. Understand you have a lot of options when you bet. It's not just pick a winner. It's pick a distance, an over-under, a manner of victory, right? Rounds in which the victory happens. You should be thinking about all of these variables as you consider what has happened in the past. Billy Joe Saunders is confused at the beginning of his fight against Canelo, but then he eventually finds a rhythm. This is a very important Canelo fight. The big question for me is, had he stayed outside, would Saunders have won most of the later rounds? Let's talk about another fight. Erislandy Lara dances and stays outside against Canelo. He goes the distance. Had he thrown more volume, would Lara have been awarded the decision? On the Scull side of the play, look at Scull against Vladimir Shishkin. Shishkin is aggressively on his front foot. He's hunting William Scull. Scull is able to go the distance. It looks like Scull's faded toward the end of the fight. My take on the fight. Right? But Scull is able to go the distance. Now, Shishkin protested the decision. But if you look at the film, you'll see that while Shishkin is aggressively on his front foot, he's having a hard time reaching Scull, who does, in my opinion, win most of the early rounds. Right? What can Canelo do that Vladimir Shishkin did not do in his fight against William Scull? Right, folks? It's important. Because understand, many people fight Canelo, they get lulled into a shootout. Right? Canelo, too, has been picking opponents who believe they can win shootouts. Isn't that Edgar Berlanga's belief? Isn't that Jaime Munguia's belief? Right? When he fought a guy who wasn't there for the shootout, was actually on his back foot, was backing away from Canelo, was countering Canelo. When Canelo fought Dimitri Bivol, that fight went the distance and Canelo lost. Right? The big question here is Scull, a big guy. Does Scull know who he is and who he's fighting? If Scull realizes that he's best on his back foot, if he realizes that Canelo is one of the hardest punchers pound for pound in the entire sport. Some of you have pointed out to me that Jaime Munguia went the distance, right? Berlanga went the distance. I believe Canelo's at the point of his career where if he's beating you, feels you can't hurt him, and has demonstrated his superiority by knocking you down relatively early in the fight, then unless you're able to snap his head back, which is very hard to do against Canelo, unless you are clearly outboxing him, Canelo's okay going to a decision. Right? Maybe the answer to the question of what exactly happened in that Callum Smith fight was that Canelo saw that Smith was badly hurt and decided, okay, I'm not going to take the extra effort to stop this guy. I'm just going to protect myself against his arm that works and win the decision. Right? The problem with Scull is that Scull is crafty. Right? What happens if not a lot of punches are landing for anyone and Scull's able to stay outside and go the distance? Does that jeopardize everything? The fight with Crawford, the other fights on Canelo's deal with Turkey, the possibility of Canelo fighting Bivol again or someone exotic, Chris Eubank, Hamza Shiraz, right? Diego Pacheco, Arthur Beterbiev. Let's talk about another fight. Ryan Garcia against Rolly Romero. The big question for me is, can a guy without Osterin come back after a year off? Change trainers, right? Understand, Ryan Garcia is back with Eddie Reynoso. One of the stories of the weekend is going to be how Reynoso is going to be in both Ryan Garcia's and Saul Alvarez's corner. Right? How is the guy going to fight a flat-footed slugger in a new weight class and not get hit? Right, folks? Let's remember that Garcia, against a shorter opponent, Gervonta Davis, got stopped on a body shot. Right? Davis is shorter like Rolly Romero, is shorter than Ryan Garcia. Right? Understand, too, and it's an interesting part of this fight, Rolly Romero has only lost to guys 5'6" or shorter. Right? Romero himself got stopped by Gervonta Davis. By the way, Davis, who had problems in his last fight, is an extremely talented fighter. Right? I personally thought he lost to Lamont Roach, but at the same time, I'm not panicking and saying, is Davis any good? If you look at his opposition and you realize he beat both of these guys you understand Davis has skills, right? He also, of course, beat Mario Barrios, who has a title at 147. Getting back to this fight, just understand the only guys to beat Rolly Romero are Southpaw Gervonta Davis and Isaac Cruz, who's orthodox. Now let's explore the Southpaw angle, even though neither of these guys is a Southpaw. I thought Rolly Romero got a break on a stoppage in a fight he was losing against an underrated Ishmael Barbosa, who's a southpaw, right? Who is taller than 5'6". But just understand, Barbosa's left is more of a straight left. It's not a Ryan Garcia type left hook, right? So here, it's a foregone conclusion with many that Ryan Garcia is going to win this fight. Right, folks? Rolly Romero is real. He's fighting a taller guy, the kind of guy he has had success against in the past. Understand, too, Ryan Garcia has gotten a bit too dependent on that left hook. The kind of guy who badly hurts you is a Chris Eubank, where Eubank has the left jab, Eubank has the left hook, but Eubank also has the right hand, and Eubank knows how to clinch, knows how to hide his head, and do all this other stuff. That's the kind of guy who hurts you. The guy who you know is a big punch. It could be Deontay Wilder, right? Wilder has a huge straight right hand, but yet Joe Parker and Zhilei Zhang both beat him. Right? The guy with the predictable big punch is at risk because of the lack of unpredictability. Right? Let me also say, too, Ryan Garcia is back. I see he's low-key. Right? This isn't the guy who was drinking beers after weigh-ins and stuff like that. But you have a new dynamic. The best trash talk of the last few days is Devin Haney's group yelling at Ryan Garcia, "Where are the muscles?" Right? The inference is, you're a PED guy. Without PEDs, you don't even have muscles. Right? Let me say, too, New York City is electric. We all know Times Square, Dick Clark, Ryan Seacrest, all of these networks have New Year's Eve specials from Times Square. You understand it's one of those great communal meeting grounds in Manhattan, right? Who's going to be more impacted by the crowd? Now, I know Rolly Romero talks a lot of smack. I'm not saying Romero doesn't have some flavor. But he just comes across as less impacted by the crowd than Ryan Garcia, who, even when he didn't have a belt, I saw him coming in the ring and he had his hat on and stuff like that. You get the feeling that the crowd matters a lot to Ryan Garcia. Well, this fight's going to be in Times Square, New York City. Right? People back east, whether it's New York, Boston, Philly, there's a tradition of heckling. Right? Understand, Ryan Garcia is going to hear other people saying, "Where are the muscles?" Right? He's going to hear other people yelling at him. Who's going to be impacted by the crowd more? From this seat, I think it's going to be Ryan Garcia. We'll see how it works out. Let's talk about another fight. Devin Haney against Jose Ramirez. Let's ask the question. Is Devin Haney ready for an aggressively front foot opponent, especially after a lengthy layoff following a fight in which he was knocked down multiple times? Right? Okay, the other guy was on Osterin. Okay, that fight didn't count. Does your body know that? Right? You were hitting the canvas multiple times. Didn't your body, whether the other guy's juicing or not, didn't your body take a beating in that fight? Right? Understand too, there's a mental side to it. Haney entered the ring an unbeaten fighter. Well, now he's been beaten up in a fight. Right? Maybe the fight didn't count on his official record. Who cares? Is there a mental injury? By mental, I mean psychological. Right? Before you were bulletproof. Before you were the guy. You beat Lomachenko. You beat Prograis. Right? Now, of course, you fought a guy who you'd fought a few times in the amateurs. He knocked you down. The boo birds came out. Right? The 20% that hate all of us. Right? Let's face it. All of us have a 20% group of skeptics. Right? The skeptics came out. Numerous people said, hey, you know, I never was that impressed with certain parts of Devin Haney's game. Well, folks, this is his fight back. He's fighting a damn good opponent. He's fighting in a hotbed place, right? New York City, right? So let's just say we have questions across the board here. Let's talk about Ramirez, right? My phone, even on vibration mode, is not giving me a break here. Let me shift over and let me talk about Ramirez. Folks, Ramirez has only lost to Josh Taylor. Now let's be clear on Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor has a very high top end if he ever decides to stay outside. Right? I've watched Josh Taylor fights. I have no idea what he's thinking. Teofimo Lopez, who I'll get to in a moment, is one of the best in the sport in the pocket. Josh Taylor's diving into the pocket. Right? Just diving into the pocket against Teofimo Lopez. Jack Catterall is a counterpuncher. Catterall needs for you to be aggressive with him, for him to be able to drop you. Right? What does Josh Taylor do? He's aggressive with Jack Catterall. I would make the argument that we need to look at the volatility in fighters. Right? You understand that Daniel Dubois, the same guy who could lose to Joe Joyce, right? Get jabbed to death by Joe Joyce and then decide he's not going to make it to the end of the fight. Right? A guy who could get decked by Kevin Lorena, who, by the way, is calling out Fabio Wardley. Right? Believe it or not, Dubois hits the canvas more than once in that Kevin Lorena fight. Right? A guy who could badly hurt Usyk, legally or illegally. Have Usyk get off the canvas. You know what? Even the guy who thought it was a low blow would say to himself, what the heck? This is my best shot at the title. This guy's hurt. I'm going to leverage this. Right? If he wants a rematch, I'll give him a rematch because I'll know I did him wrong here. But I need to do him wrong here because I need the title. That's not Daniel Dubois. Right? So you need to realize that Dubois, the guy who beat Filip Bergovic, the guy who beat AJ, has good days and bad days. Right? We need to figure out the high volatility fighters. The Josh Taylor who beat Jose Ramirez, in my opinion, would have beaten most men that day. Right? That Josh Taylor was bulletproof. Unfortunately, Josh himself doesn't seem to know what works for him. The other guy who beat Ramirez, and this is the open question in the room here, is Arnold Barbosa. Right? Barbosa is still unbeaten and may very well be underrated. Right? My point to you is simply, There are a lot of questions in that Haney Ramirez fight. A lot. Let's see how it turns out. It's noteworthy, too, that the fight's not being fought at 140. Looks like it's being fought at a catch weight. The last fight, Teofimo Lopez, right? Already there are questions, right? Teofimo, type A personality, came up in New York City. He's fighting in New York in front of the crowd. You know, this guy feeds off the crowd. Let's just say he's not the ice-cold assassin a Alexis Arguello is, right? Arguello could travel all over and not get phased, right? Fighting a guy in his backyard, etc. Here, I'm just telling you the way volatility works. Fighting at home doesn't work for everyone, right? George Kambosos, where did he beat Teofimo Lopez? This fight, let's just say, it's an atmosphere where a hometown guy might feel added pressure. Now he's fighting an ice-cold assassin type, Arnold Barbosa, right? Barbosa is complicated. Look at films. He knows how to twist his body. Importantly, he's high volume. The big question for me is, can Lopez deal with a boxer who is going to force a moving pocket and is not going to allow Lopez, who has a problem with mobile lefties like Sander Martin or even orthodox guys who fight lefty against him like Jermaine Ortiz, right? Barbosa's not going to allow Lopez to plant his feet and to time his counters. If Lopez is forced to pick up his feet, what kind of fight do we have? Let me just add, Barbosa is right-handed, but unlike a Josh Taylor, for example, Barbosa has the discipline to stay outside where Lopez might not be able to match his volume. Right? This is an interesting fight, folks. This is an interesting weekend. Let me hear from you. Canelo, Scull, Garcia, Romero, Haney, Ramirez, Lopez, Barbosa. How do you see it? I look forward to your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.